The recycled air of Nexus Prime carried the weight of 10,000 sorrows. Commander Alex Torres moved through the refugee quarters, his boots echoing softly against the metal decking as he navigated between makeshift shelters fashioned from emergency blankets and salvaged materials. The station had been designed to house 3,000 souls. Now it groaned under the burden of nearly 4 times that number, all fleeing the Zarathi advance that had carved a bloody swath across the outer colonies. He paused beside a young Altarian family, their blue-tinged skin pale with malnutrition, and made notes on his tablet. Medical supplies, food rations, clothing, the list never seemed to shrink. As Nexus Prime's refugee coordinator, Alex had seen every shade of trauma that war could paint on a being's soul, but some cases still caught his attention. Like her, she sat apart from the others, pressed against the far bulkhead in Section C7, knees drawn up to her chest. Her species was unfamiliar to him, humanoid certainly, with the same basic configuration of 2 arms, 2 legs, and delicate features that suggested intelligence and grace. But where others huddled together for comfort, she remained solitary. Where others wept or raged or told their stories to anyone who would listen, she simply existed in perfect, unsettling silence. Her clothing marked her as one of the dispossessed, a torn gray coat that had once been fine material, boots worn through. At the soles and beneath it all, the careful way she held herself that spoke of someone trying very hard to disappear. Kira of Vexen, Alex read from his tablet as he approached. The name had been recorded when she'd first been processed 3 weeks ago, along with precious little else. No family listed, no occupation, no emergency contacts. Just a name and a world that no longer existed. She looked up as his shadow fell across her small space. Her eyes were the deep violet of her homeworld's legendary sunsets, or so the cultural database claimed. Alex had never seen Vexon, but he found himself wondering if the reality could match the haunting beauty of her gaze. Miss Kira? He kept his voice gentle, having learned that sudden movements or loud noises could send traumatized refugees into panic. I'm Commander Torres. I wanted to check on your integration status. She studied him for a long moment, and Alex felt an odd sensation, as if those violet eyes were measuring not just his words but his very soul. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the musical accent of the Vexani, though her standard was flawless. I require nothing, Commander. Everyone requires something, he replied, settling carefully onto his haunches to bring himself to her eye level. Food, shelter, medical attention, or sometimes just someone to listen. That's why I'm here. Something flickered across her expression, surprise perhaps, or the ghost of some deeper emotion. Her fingers, he noticed, bore small scars along the knuckles, and there was a tension in her posture that spoke of muscles held ready, despite her apparent fragility. You waste your concern, Kira said quietly. There are others with greater need. Maybe, but you're the one I'm talking to right now. Alex made another note on his tablet, then looked back at her. When did you last eat? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She glanced away, and for just a moment her careful mask slipped. He caught sight of something else beneath the surface, a steel core wrapped in deliberate vulnerability, like a blade sheathed in silk. This morning, the distribution in Section B. A lie, Alex realized. He'd checked the meal logs before his rounds, and her ID hadn't been scanned in 2 days. But calling her out would only make her retreat further. Well, I was heading to the commissary anyway. Care to join me? The synthetic protein isn't exactly gourmet, but it's better than going hungry. For a heartbeat, he thought she might refuse. Then something shifted in those remarkable eyes, a crack in whatever wall she'd built around herself. If you wish, Commander. As she rose, Alex caught a glimpse of her back through a tear in her coat. For just an instant, he could have sworn he saw the edge of some kind of marking there, intricate lines that seemed to catch the corridor's dim lighting. But when she turned to face him, pulling the coat tighter around her shoulders, he wondered if he'd imagined it. Walking beside her through the crowded corridors, Alex found himself stealing glances at his mysterious companion. There was something about the way she moved. Too fluid, too aware of her surroundings, like someone accustomed to danger even in apparent safety. "Commander," she said suddenly, her voice barely audible above the hum of the station's life support. "Why do you do this work?" The question surprised him. In 3 years of refugee coordination, few had ever asked about his motivations. "Someone has to," he said simply, "and I'd rather it be someone who cares about the outcome." She nodded slowly as if weighing his words against some internal measure. "Caring can be dangerous. So can not caring." They walked in companionable silence. After that, two souls navigating the careful dance of trust that trauma made so difficult. Alex didn't know then that the woman beside him had once been death incarnate, that the scars hidden beneath her refugee's coat told the story of 100 battles fought in defense of worlds he'd never heard of. He only knew that something about Kira of Vexon called to him, and that her presence felt like the first honest thing he'd encountered in months of managing desperate, frightened people. If he'd known what was coming, the screams that would soon echo through Nexus Prime's corridors, the blood that would stain its decks the moment when his quiet refugee would shed her mask and reveal the warrior beneath, perhaps he would have been afraid. Instead, he simply walked beside her, and for the first time in weeks, Kira allowed herself to feel something other than the crushing weight of her self-imposed exile. Neither of them noticed the subtle way the lights seemed to dim as they passed, or how the station's sensors registered the faintest spike in bioenergy from the woman who had sworn never to kill again. The commissary's artificial daylight cycle had dimmed to evening amber when Alex found Kira again, 3 days after their first shared meal. She sat in the observation deck's far corner, staring out at the star field beyond the reinforced transparisteel. Her reflection ghosted across the darkness, a fragile figure wrapped in solitude. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, carrying 2 cups of synthetic coffee. She accepted the offering with a nod, their fingers brushing briefly as she took the cup. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through Alex's chest, and he noticed how she quickly pulled her hand away, as if the touch had affected her too. "You've been avoiding the meal distributions again," he said gently. "I told you, others need it more." "Kira?" He waited until she met his eyes. "You can't take care of anyone if you don't take care of yourself first." Something flickered across her features, pain, memory, loss. "I tried that once, taking care of others." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I failed them all." The words hung between them like a confession. Alex set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. "What happened on Vexon?" For a long moment, she remained silent. Then, as if a dam had finally cracked, the words began to flow. "I was Shadow Guard," she said, her fingers unconsciously tracing patterns on her spine through the torn coat. "Elite warriors, bio-bonded with living armor that responded to our thoughts, our emotions. We were meant to be the perfect protectors." Alex felt his breath catch. Shadow Guard. He'd heard whispers, legends of Vexani warriors who could become one with their weapons, who moved like death itself across battlefields. But they'd been mythical figures, stories told in bars across the outer rim. "The Zarathi came without warning," Kira continued, her violet eyes distant with memory. "Their ships blotted out our 3 suns. We fought. Gods, how we fought. But there were so many of them." Her hand moved to her chest over her heart. "My bondmate, Thane, he died in my arms as the capital burned. The armor, it feeds on our emotions, our connections. When he died, part of me died with him. The biolink shattered." Alex reached out instinctively, covering her scarred hand with his own. She didn't pull away this time, and he felt the tremor that ran through her at the contact. "The last transport off-world," she whispered. "I could have saved more, should have saved more, but I was broken, useless. The armor wouldn't respond. I watched children die because I couldn't stop." Alex's voice was firm but gentle. "You survived. That matters. Does it?" Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I swore an oath after that. Never again would I take a life. Never again would I let the warrior wake. They sat in silence, her hand still beneath his. Alex found himself studying her profile in the starlight, the elegant curve of her neck, the way her dark hair fell across her shoulders. Beautiful, yes, but more than that. There was strength in her even now, especially now. For what it's worth, he said quietly. I'm glad you survived. Glad you're here. She turned to look at him then, and the vulnerability in her eyes made his chest tighten. Why? Because... He struggled for words that wouldn't sound hollow. Because the galaxy is darker without people like you in it. Because even broken, you're trying to help others. Because... She leaned forward suddenly, pressing her forehead against his. The gesture was intimate, desperate, and Alex felt his heart hammering against his ribs. I can't, she whispered. I can't let myself care again. It hurts too much when they're gone. I'm not going anywhere, he promised, though they both knew how easily such promises could be broken in their uncertain world. They stayed like that, for a long time, breathing the same air, sharing the same space. When Kira finally pulled back, there were silver tracks on her cheeks. There's something else, she said, and her voice carried a new tension. The missing refugees. I've been sensing something. Patterns. The ones who've disappeared, they're all from the outer colonies, all from worlds the Zarathi conquered. Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. You think they're being targeted? I know they are. Her hand moved unconsciously to her back again, and Alex glimpsed something else in her expression, not just fear, but a predator's awareness. I can smell it on the air. Death. Hunting. It's a scent I know too well. Before Alex could respond, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steady again. But in that moment of darkness, he could have sworn he saw something, a faint luminescence along Kira's spine, visible through the tear in her coat. What was that? He asked. Kira's eyes had gone wide, her hand pressed flat against her back. No, she breathed. Not now. Not yet. The lights flickered again, and this time the luminescence was unmistakable. Intricate patterns flowing like liquid light beneath her skin. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Kira, what's happening to you? She stood abruptly, backing away from him. I have to go, have to meditate, center myself. The armor, it responds to emotion, to threat. I can't let it wake up. Wait. Alex reached for her, but she was already moving toward the exit. Stay away from me, she called over her shoulder, but there was desperation in her voice rather than anger. Please, Alex, for your own safety, stay away. She disappeared into the corridor, leaving Alex alone with the stars and the lingering scent of ozone that seemed to follow in her wake. As he sat there, processing everything she'd told him, one thought kept circling through his mind. If Kira was right about the disappearances, if something was hunting the refugees, then the station was far from the safe haven they'd believed it to be. And somewhere in the depths of Nexus Prime, the woman he was falling in love with was fighting a battle against the very nature that might be their only hope of survival. The lights flickered once more, and Alex shivered, finally understanding that the gentle refugee he'd been trying to help was something far more dangerous and far more necessary than he'd ever imagined. The alarms began screaming at Aero 347 station time. Alex bolted upright in his quarters, instantly alert as his training kicked in. The klaxons weren't the standard evacuation tone. This was the deep, bone-rattling wail reserved for hostile incursion. Something that hadn't sounded in Nexus Prime's 30-year history. He was pulling on his uniform when the lights cut out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing the corridors in hellish red as Alex ran toward the command center. The comm channels crackled with panicked voices, security teams calling for backup, civilians screaming, and underneath it all, a sound that made his blood freeze, the distinctive whine of energy weapons. Torres. Captain Hayes grabbed him as he burst into the command center. Thank God. We've got breach points in sections D and F. Unknown hostiles, military-grade equipment. How many? Alex was already pulling up refugee population charts, calculating evacuation routes. At least a dozen, maybe more. They're not responding to communications, and they're cutting through our security teams like they're not even there. Alex's stomach dropped. What about the civilians? That's the thing. They're not targeting randomly. They're moving through the refugee quarters with purpose, like they're looking for specific people. The words hit Alex like a physical blow. Kira's warnings about the missing refugees, her talk of patterns and hunting, she'd been right. And now whatever had been picking off isolated victims was here in force. I need to get to the refugee quarters, Alex said. Like hell, station personnel are evacuating to the core sectors. That's an order. Alex was already moving toward the exit. Those people are my responsibility. He didn't wait for Hayes' response, racing through corridors filled with emergency lighting and the acrid smell of burned circuitry. The lifts were offline, so he took the maintenance ladders, his hands slipping on the rungs as explosions shook the station's superstructure. Section C was chaos. Refugees ran in all directions, some carrying children, others dragging whatever possessions they could manage. Alex fought against the flow, searching desperately for a familiar figure in a torn gray coat. He found her in the same corner where they'd first met, but she wasn't alone. 3 figures in black armor stood over a group of huddled refugees, their weapons trained on the terrified civilians. The armor was sleek, predatory, with helmet designs that suggested insectoid features. Zarathi raiders. Alex had seen the intelligence reports but never thought to encounter them in person. One of the raiders was speaking in a harsh, clicking language while scanning the group with some kind of device. When it chimed, he grabbed a young Altarian woman by the arm, dragging her to her feet. No, the woman's mate lunged forward only to be struck down by an energy blast that left him convulsing on the deck. Alex started forward instinctively, knowing he was unarmed and outmatched but unable to watch the slaughter. That's when he saw her. Kira stood at the edge of the crowd, perfectly still amid the chaos. Her coat had fallen away, revealing a form-fitting bodysuit beneath. But it was her back that made Alex's breath catch. The entire surface was covered in intricate patterns that pulsed with soft silver light, like circuitry made of living metal. The raider holding the Altarian woman suddenly stopped, his scanner emitting a new tone. He turned slowly, methodically, until his attention fixed on Kira. When he spoke, his voice was electronically modulated but clearly excited. Vexani Shadow Guard, alive. The other raiders immediately swung their weapons toward her. The refugees scattered screaming, but Kira didn't move. She stood like a statue, head bowed, hands clenched at her sides. Surrender, warrior, the lead raider commanded. The hegemony has use for your kind. I am no warrior, Kira said quietly, but her voice carried clearly across the space. I am broken, I am nothing. The raider laughed, a sound like grinding metal. The scars on your spine say otherwise. Living armor never truly dies, it only sleeps. Alex saw it then, the way Kira's shoulders tensed, the subtle shift in her stance. The patterns on her back blazed brighter, and the air around her seemed to shimmer with heat distortion. Run, she whispered. Not to the raiders, but to the refugees. All of you, run now. The lead raider raised his weapon. You will come with us or we will take you in pieces. That's when Alex did something phenomenally stupid. He stepped out from cover, placing himself between the raiders and Kira. Leave her alone. The raider's helmet turned toward him with mechanical precision. Human. You will move or die. Alex, no. Kira's voice was anguished. Get away from here, please. I'm not leaving you, he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. The raider's weapon whined as it charged to full power. Alex closed his eyes, preparing for the end. The energy blast never came. When Alex opened his eyes, Kira was standing in front of him, her hand extended toward the raider. The energy bolt hung suspended in the air, crackling with barely contained power, held motionless by some invisible force. You want a warrior? Her voice had changed, becoming something cold and deadly. You want the Shadow Guard? The patterns on her back exploded into brilliant light, and Alex watched in awe as liquid metal began flowing across her skin like living quicksilver. It spread from the glowing sigils, covering her arms, her legs, her torso, forming plates and joints and weapon systems with organic fluidity. In seconds, she was transformed, no longer the broken refugee he'd come to care for, but something magnificent and terrible, a figure of living metal and controlled violence, her eyes now blazing with the same silver light that covered her body. "Then you shall have one," she said, and her voice resonated with harmonics that made the deck plates vibrate. She released the suspended energy bolt, letting it dissipate harmlessly, then moved. Alex had never seen anything like it. She flowed rather than ran, her armored form becoming a blur of silver death. The first raider managed to get off a single shot before her hand punched through his chest plate. The second tried to flee. She was on him before he'd taken 3 steps. The third raider, the leader, had better reflexes. He rolled aside as Kira's clawed gauntlet swept through the space where his head had been, coming up with a blade that hummed with energy. "So," he hissed, "the sleeping warrior wakes at last." They fought like dancing partners who'd rehearsed their steps in blood. The raider was skilled, his movements precise and deadly, but Kira was something beyond skill. She was art made manifest, violence as poetry, every movement flowing into the next with lethal grace. When it was over, when the last raider lay still, on the blood-stained deck, Kira stood amid the carnage like an avenging angel. The armor began to flow back into the patterns on her spine, leaving her human once more. She turned to Alex then, and he saw tears on her cheeks. "I tried so hard," she whispered. "I tried to stay broken." Alex stepped forward, ignoring the bodies, ignoring the blood, ignoring everything but the woman who'd just saved his life. When he reached her, he cupped her face in his hands, looking into those haunted violet eyes. "You're not broken," he said firmly. "You're exactly who you need to be." And then he kissed her. It was desperate and fierce and tasted of tears and necessity. When they broke apart, Kira was staring at him in wonder. "You're not afraid," she breathed. "Of you?" "Never." He pressed his forehead against hers. "I love you, Kira of Vexen. Warrior, refugee, survivor, all of you." The words hung between them like a bridge across the darkness of their respective pasts. And for the first time since Vexen fell, Kira allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be saved too. Around them, the stations, alarms continued to wail. But for this moment they had found something worth fighting for in each other's arms. The armored form that had been Kira moved through Nexus Prime's corridors like liquid death. Alex followed at a distance, coordinating evacuations through his comm unit, while watching the woman he loved systematically hunt down every raider on the station. It wasn't a battle, it was an execution. She found them in groups in hiding places behind defensive positions that should have been impregnable. The Shadow Guard armor made her faster than thought, stronger than necessity, and utterly, terrifyingly efficient. Each encounter lasted only moments before ending in silence. Section D secured. Her voice crackled through the comm, emotionless and professional. But Alex could hear the undertone of barely controlled rage that drove her forward. "Kira, the evacuation's nearly complete. You can stop now." "Negative. Still tracking 3 hostiles in engineering." Alex changed direction, heading for the lower decks. He found Captain Hayes and a security team setting up a defensive perimeter outside engineering. "She's clearing them out one by one," Hayes said, his voice mixing admiration and fear. "I've never seen anything like it." "What the hell is she?" "She's the person keeping us alive," Alex replied firmly. Through the bulkhead, they could hear the "ah-yah" sounds of combat, energy weapons firing, metal screaming against metal, and then silence. The engineering section door cycled open, and Kira emerged, her armor gleaming silver in the emergency lighting. "All hostiles neutralized," she reported. But as the words left her lips, the armor began to flow back into the patterns on her spine, leaving her human and vulnerable once more. She swayed, exhaustion hitting her like a physical blow. Alex was there instantly, catching her as she stumbled. "I've got you," he murmured, supporting her weight as her legs threatened to give out. "The armor," she whispered against his chest. "It takes so much. I'm not used to feeling everything again." Alex helped her to a nearby bench, noting how the other security personnel gave them a wide berth. He couldn't blame them. What they'd witnessed was beyond their understanding of warfare. "Status report," Hayes demanded, though he kept his distance. 12 raiders total, Kira said, her voice growing stronger. "All eliminated. But this was just a scouting force. The main fleet?" She looked up at Alex, her eyes dark with knowledge. "They know I'm here now. They'll come in force." "How long do we have?" Alex asked. "Hours, maybe less." She stood on unsteady legs, determination overriding exhaustion. "The station needs to be evacuated, everyone. Now." Hayes shook his head. "Impossible. We've got over 10,000 souls here. The evacuation ships can't." "Then people will die," Kira said simply. "The Zarathi don't take prisoners from worlds they've conquered. They harvest." The word hung in the air like a curse. Alex felt something cold settle in his stomach. Harvest? Genetic material. Neural patterns. They use conquered species as raw material for their bioweapons. Kira's hand moved unconsciously to her spine. "That's why they wanted me alive. Shadow Guard armor bonds at the genetic level. They could use my DNA to create an army." Alex felt the blood drain from his face. "Jesus." "We need to talk," Kira said quietly. "Alone." Hayes started to protest, but Alex cut him off. "Give us 10 minutes, then we'll help with the evacuation." When they were alone in a maintenance alcove, Kira turned to face him fully. In the dim emergency lighting, she looked ethereal, dangerous, and heartbreakingly beautiful. "I should leave," she said without preamble. "Take a shuttle. Draw them away from the station. It's me they want." "Absolutely not." "Alex, no." He gripped her shoulders, feeling the tension in her muscles. "We've lost too many people already. I won't lose you too. You don't understand. The armor, it changes you. Every time I use it, I become more like what I was before, more like the weapon I tried to stop being." "And?" She stared at him in surprise. "And I'm dangerous. To everyone. Including you." Alex cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Kira, 3 hours ago I watched you save hundreds of lives. I saw you stand between civilians and death itself. If that's what you become when you use the armor, then maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs. You don't know what you're asking." He silenced her with a kiss, deep and desperate and full of all the words he couldn't find. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I know exactly what I'm asking," he said. "I'm asking you to be who you are. All of who you are, warrior, protector, the woman I love, everything." Tears tracked down her cheeks. "The last time I let myself love someone. This isn't last time, this is now. This is us." He pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of her body against his. "And I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, she simply held him, her face buried against his neck. He could feel her trembling, could sense the war being fought inside her between fear and hope. "If I do this," she whispered, "if I stop running and start fighting again, I need to know you'll still be here when it's over." "Kira." He pulled back to look at her. "Where else would I be?" The smile that crossed her face was radiant and heartbreaking in equal measure. "Then I guess we'd better save this station." She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "But first." This time, when they kissed, it was different. Not desperate or fearful, but claiming. A promise made in the language of touch and breath and racing hearts. Alex felt her armor respond, metal patterns flowing briefly across her skin where his hands touched her, as if the biosuit itself was reacting to their emotional connection. When they broke apart, Kira's eyes were blazing with silver light. "Ready?" she asked. Alex nodded, taking her hand. "Let's go save some lives." As they headed back toward the command center, Alex caught a glimpse of something on her back through the tear in her bodysuit. The warrior sigils were no longer dormant silver. They pulsed with warm golden light, as if her armor had found something worth protecting again. Behind them, Space began to shimmer as the first Zarathi warships dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls bristling with weapons designed to harvest worlds. But for the first time since Vexon fell, a shadow guard was ready to meet them. The observation deck of Nexus Prime offered a perfect view of the approaching Zarathi fleet. 17 warships arranged in a harvesting formation that Alex recognized from intelligence briefings he'd hoped never to see in person. Beautiful, aren't they? Kira's voice was calm as she stood beside him, her armor fully manifested and gleaming in the starlight. Death has its own aesthetics. Alex squeezed her gauntleted hand, marveling at how the living metal felt warm under his touch. How do we fight that many ships? We don't fight them. Her helmet retracted, revealing her face framed by silver, metal. I do. Kira, listen to me. She turned to face him fully, her violet eyes serious. The armor can survive in vacuum. I can board their command ship, take out their central coordination. Without leadership, the fleet will scatter. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's what I was born to do. She reached up, touching his face with gentle metal fingers. Either way, it gets the civilians to safety. Through the deck's speakers, Captain Hayes's voice crackled. All evacuation ships loaded, we're ready for departure. Alex looked out at the approaching fleet, then back at the woman who'd become everything to him in just a few short days. There has to be another way. There is. Kira's smile was soft and sad. You could come with me. What? The armor can extend life support to one other person. We could take their flagship together, give the evacuation fleet time to reach the jump point. Alex stared at her. You're serious. Completely. The biosuit bonds to whoever I'm connected to, emotionally, physically. Her cheeks flushed slightly. If you're willing to trust me completely, it could work. The magnitude of what she was, suggesting, hit him like a physical blow. Not just the military mission, but the intimacy it would require, a joining that went beyond anything they'd shared so far. I'll need a minute to. The deck shuddered, as energy bolts from the lead Zarathi ship struck Nexus Prime's shields. Through the observation port, Alex could see the barrier flashing orange with each impact. Time's up, Kira said grimly. What's it going to be? Alex looked at her, really looked. The woman who'd hidden among refugees, who'd tried to bury her, warrior nature, who'd saved his life and stolen his heart in the span of hours. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Tell me what I need to do. Relief flooded her features. Are you sure? Once the armor bonds with you, there's no going back. You'll be connected to me, to the biosuit, permanently. Permanently? Alex felt his heart skip. As in forever, Alex. The Shadow Guard bonding process it's essentially a marriage. In every sense that matters. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the comm system, they could hear Hayes coordinating the evacuation fleet's departure. Forever, Alex repeated, then grinned. Well, I was going to ask anyway, this just moves up the timeline. Kira laughed, the sound bright and astonished. You want to propose? Now? Why not? I love you, you love me, we're about to bond for life. Anyway. He dropped to one knee, taking her armored hand in both of his. Kira of Vexon, will you marry me? You absolute madman. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled him to his feet. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. They kissed then, hard and desperate and full of promise, as around them the station groaned under the Zarathi assault. When they broke apart, Kira's eyes were blazing with golden light. Ready for the bonding? She asked. What do I need to do? Instead of answering with words, she placed her palm against his chest. The armor responded instantly, flowing from her hand across his body in streams of liquid metal. Alex gasped as the biosuit covered him, every nerve ending lighting up with new sensations. But it was more than just physical. As the armor completed its embrace, Alex felt something else. Kira's presence in his mind, her emotions, her memories. The fall of Vexon, the loss of her bondmate, the years of hiding and guilt and self-imposed exile. All of it flowed through their connection, and she felt him in return. His compassion, his dedication to helping others, the love that had grown so quickly it still amazed him. The loneliness he'd carried for years, the sense of purpose he'd found in refugee work, the way she'd changed everything just by existing. "My God," Alex breathed, understanding flooding through him. "This is what you lost, this connection." "And what I've found again," Kira replied, her voice echoing strangely through their shared neural link. "Are you ready?" Alex tested the armor's systems, marveling at how natural it felt to move in the biosuit. Through their connection, he could access centuries of Shadow Guard combat experience, tactical knowledge flowing through their bond like inherited memory. "Let's go save some people," he said. They launched from Nexus Prime's main hangar in a commandeered shuttle, the armor allowing them to survive the transition to vacuum when they abandoned the craft and flew toward the Zarathi flagship under their own power. What followed was a battle that would become legend in the outer colonies, two figures in living armor, moving like matched dancers through the enemy ship's corridors. Alex had never been a soldier, but through their bond he fought with the skill of a master warrior. Kira, no longer carrying the weight of her guilt alone, moved with a grace and power that had been missing since Vexon's fall. They carved through the ship's defenses like light through darkness, their shared purpose making them unstoppable. When they reached the command bridge, the Zarathi admiral actually smiled at their approach. "Two shadow guards," he hissed. "The hegemony will be most pleased." "The hegemony," Alex said, his voice carrying harmonics from the armor, "is about to have a very bad day." The final battle was brief, but brutal. When it ended, the Zarathi fleet was scattering into hyperspace, their coordination broken, their harvesting mission abandoned. Alex and Kira floated in the wreckage of the command bridge, holding each other as debris drifted around them. Through their bond, they could feel each other's exhaustion, triumph, and overwhelming relief. "So," Alex said, his helmet retracting so he could see her face. "What now?" Kira smiled, beautiful and terrible and absolutely his. "Now we hunt the rest of them. There are other refugee stations, other colonies that need protection. Together, always together." She leaned in to kiss him, their armor flowing and merging where they touched. Partners in everything. Through the bridge's shattered viewports, they could see the evacuation fleet jumping to hyperspace, 10,000 lives saved by their sacrifice and courage. "I love you, Mrs. Torres," Alex murmured against her lips. "I love you too, husband," Kira replied, the word carrying weight and promise and the certainty of forever. They had work to do, a galaxy to protect, other warriors to find and train, a future to build from the ashes of their respective pasts. But for now, they simply held each other in the darkness between stars, two souls who had found their perfect match in the most unlikely of circumstances. The Shadow Guard had awakened, and this time they would not fall. This time they had each other.